I'm Gary Stevenson, former trader and economist, and today I'm going to be answering questions from the honesty box. Do traders deserve to be paid that much in bonuses? This is an interesting one, right? Because it's obviously like up that like we live in a world where, you know, people like my dad and just ordinary people are working like hard 5 days a week, you know, often long, difficult jobs and getting paid like 20, 30 grand and struggling to pay the bills. And then you get kids like me coming from nowhere getting paid like £500,000 in their early 20s for basically playing a computer game. And it is ridiculous. But let's also recognize people like me who got paid a lot of money, but also, you know, worked hard and studied hard to get the best jobs and made a few £1,000,000. You know, we pay our taxes. What qualities made you the best trader? The best trader. Highly contested whether I was the best trader. There's a lot of different ways to be a good trader, right? But for me, I studied economics and I realized that we were all wrong. That's the first thing. I think what is really amazing, both then and now, is how few economists are able to actually recognize how bad we've done in the economy and how bad we understand things. I was lucky to work with some super smart guys, but the average economist, the average trader, they're often very mathematically skilled, but they're not that smart. And the other thing which was a big advantage that I had was that because I come from a poor background, and very few traders nowadays do, I was able to actually just go and ask people like simple economic questions, understand what's happening in their lives, understand why they don't spend more money. I think nowadays we live in a society which is becoming increasingly like bifurcated, like split into two groups. And there's this kind of elite society, which includes almost all traders, that just have almost no interaction with people of ordinary financial backgrounds. Like, things are not getting better, but they can't see it. Yeah, there's this, really, honestly, there's this crazy let them eat cake thing happening, where like, this elite class have totally separated themselves from society. They get richer and richer and richer every year. And when ordinary people say, hey, like, we can't afford to feed our kids, they turn around and say, what do you mean? We're richer than we've ever been. And they just can't see it, unfortunately. But it's kind of funny in a way. Will you give me £1,000,000? No. Are the drug-taking stereotypes about the stock market industry true? I wasn't really aware of like much about cocaine. Like when I was a teenager, like most of my friends were smoking weed, so I didn't really know much about cocaine. So obviously I was working like from really early in the morning, like 7 in the morning. But people were going out super late at night. And when I tried to go out with them, I just couldn't do it. I would just fall asleep, and I didn't really understand how they did it. And it wasn't really till like years later that I realized that basically everyone was on cocaine. Personally, I think people are quite annoying when they take cocaine, but it's up to them, I suppose. Are you a communist? No, I'm not a communist. Frequently accused of being a communist. You know, I went to LSE, I went to Oxford. I was like one of the most successful traders in the world for one of the biggest banks in the world. I made my money betting that society will collapse, you know. You know, is a fireman a communist? You know, I'm an economist. I can see the economy is collapsing. I'm trying to stop it collapsing. I'm not trying to create perfect equality. I'm just trying to not make everything be totally shit. If that makes me a communist, call me a communist. I want to be a trader. What advice do you have? There's two kinds of traders nowadays, right? There's like professional traders that work for a bank, or there's this kind of stay-at-home trader, which has become more and more popular. I think this stay-at-home trader, like do it yourself on your kitchen laptop, is super dangerous. There's like loads of terrible advice about how to do it on the internet. I would advise like really stay away from doing like your own personal day trading. If you want to be a professional trader, you need to get like a super top degree from a super top university, probably in something numerical like maths or economics. The truth of the matter is, if you don't come from a rich family and you don't have connections in that industry, it is not impossible, but like incredibly difficult to get these jobs. That doesn't mean you can't try to do it, like especially if you are very talented at maths or something, you can try and get into that top university, get that top grade and get that job. But even with the top grades, you're competing largely with rich kids from rich families who have connections you don't have. So yeah, try your best, but good luck. It's extremely difficult if you're not from a rich family. Is there actually any science to trading, or is it just gambling? You know, people who ask this question, listen, you read my book, there's a guy in the book, it's called Billy, who was a fucking genius trader, didn't go to university, came from a working class background, and he was the best trader every single year I was there, except for the 1 year that I beat him. You know, and you know, you and me can sit here and say, oh, maybe he's just gambling, maybe he's just lucky, you know. Maybe Cristiano Ronaldo is just fucking lucky. Maybe he just fucking lucks at every single fucking game. Maybe Messi's just fucking lucky. Listen, these questions are so nihilist when people ask shit like this. Listen, some people are actually good at shit. Some people understand shit. You know, do you want to listen to them or not?
You seem riled up by that one.
No, because you know what? I get these economists all the time, right? All the time, these posh middle class economists that get everything wrong every year. And then when I say to them, why you get everything wrong every year? They say, oh, it's impossible to get everything right. And I'm like, well, I get it right every year. Are you going to listen to me or not? And then they just say, no, you're just fucking lucky. And then they just fucking destroy the economy. It pisses me off.
Have you ever got anything wrong?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. My first kitchen renovation was terrible. Happy? Yeah. Growing up working class, did you ever feel guilty earning a lot of money as a trader? Yeah, so there's one scene in my book, which is when I made my first bonus. And like, I had been led to believe that I was going to be making about £100,000. And I was super young. It would have been the beginning of 2010, so I've been 23. And I actually got paid just under £400,000, and it was like a massive shock. And I saw my dad, you know, well, both my parents obviously, but my dad used to wake up early and go early to work and, you know, come back late and for 20 grand, you know, and it's up. And but, you know, personally, I don't think I feel guilty. There's like a lot of people like to think Gary does what he does because he feels guilty. And I think, to be honest, when people tell themselves that, I think they're often just giving themselves excuses for not doing more. You know, are you going to help us, or are you going to let the country fall apart? Should billionaires exist? $1 billion is a huge amount of money. It's a crazy amount of money, £1 billion. And if you have £1 billion, then you're making like £1 million a week passive income. Yeah, it's too much. It's too much. You know, I'm nothing against people being rich, but like, should Vladimir Putin exist? Should somebody be so powerful that they can steamroll your country, take all your shit, and drive your family into poverty? Well, I mean, it's up to you. Do you want your kids to be poor? Yeah. Do you want your kids to be poor? Fine, yeah, if you do, then have billionaires. Why haven't politicians taxed the rich? This is a good question. Why haven't politicians taxed the rich yet? I was actually thinking about this on my cycle here. They're scared of the newspapers and the owners of the newspapers, who are generally billionaires. You know, these billionaires are powerful people. They own the newspapers, they fund the political parties. They have a huge amount of power. And I think senior people in the Labour Party, they're scared of these guys off.
Can anything change if the media is so controlled by the powerful?
Well, I mean, look, you know, I get more views than Question Time. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's quite interesting, right? Because it's so obvious, and it has been obvious for ages, that social media is becoming and will become more and more powerful in politics. And you saw like Donald Trump, you know, take advantage of that. And the mainstream media and the mainstream political parties have been unbelievably slow into that game. And then you have people like me making videos from my kitchen, getting like 50 million views a month. Is crypto the future of finance? No. Is that enough?
Yeah. Well, what's your view on crypto? Go on, tell us about it.
I think it's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
I think it's a pyramid scheme. But it's crazy if you think about it. It's a pyramid scheme that's gotten so big that they were literally able to buy the US presidency. And now they've bought the US presidency. They're trying to use the US presidency to get US taxpayer money to buy their crypto. It's like, it's a level of criminality and corruption that we've never seen before. What's the biggest myth about rich people? That they're super smart and that they have these like mad Illuminati meetings where they like sacrifice like, I don't know, virgins or something. Like most rich people, they wear nice suits and they're well educated and they speak posh. They don't have a clue what's going on. They're no smarter than you. Obviously some of them are smart, but they're no smarter than your average guy. They're very divorced from what's happening. The very rich, they live in these societies which like give them unbelievable levels of luxury. And they are really obviously, rapidly, aggressively destabilizing those societies to get a little bit more. It's so stupid. If the rich were smart, they would be trying to call a ceasefire here. They've won, they've got everything, they're unbelievably rich. And yet, they're pushing for more in a way that is going to destroy the societies they live in. It's the stupidest thing ever. It's the stupidest thing ever. So they're not smart, they're just regular people like you and me. Do you make a lot of money from YouTube? This is a good question. So basically, most of the money YouTubers make comes from putting adverts in the video, and I never put adverts in the video. You do at a certain point start to get paid some like automatic money. So like for years I had to pay to make the videos, and then for years after that I made like very, very little money. The channel like blew up at the beginning of this year, so I actually did make some money in like March and April this year. But to be honest, it's the first time I've ever made money. I think after 5 years, I probably deserve to make something. One day, hopefully. You say tax the rich, but what does that look like? All right, so tax wealth, not work. It's not about taxing high earning individuals. We're not talking about taxing doctors or lawyers. It's about people with enormous amounts of hoarded wealth. So individuals and families with wealth of 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, £1 billion. These guys make like 5-6% a year on their wealth anyway. You know, I would like to see them taxed 2% a year, 3% a year. To be totally honest, that's not enough, because even if you tax them 2-3% a year, their wealth is still going to keep growing. You need to understand, like, we do not live in a rapidly growing economy. So if the wealth holdings of these guys are growing and growing and growing and growing, it's coming from somebody, it's coming from somewhere. And it's not a coincidence that at this time of massive growth in the wealth of the very rich, you're seeing government being effectively bankrupted, middle class not being able to afford homes. Like, these are the same thing. These are the same thing. I'm not even trying to redistribute. I'm trying to stop the redistribution that is happening from the working class, from the middle class, from the government to the very rich. You need to tax these very wealthy wealth hoarders really at quite a high amount to stop them from growing and growing and growing their wealth, squeezing out the middle class, squeezing out government. That's what I want to do. Snog, marry, avoid. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Nigel Farage. I'd snog Donald Trump. He'd be funny, wouldn't it? He'd do something weird. You wouldn't want to spend extended time with Elon Musk, would you? Listen, Nigel Farage, whatever he tells you about foreigners and immigrants, ask yourself and ask Nigel Farage, where does his money come from and what's he going to do about the taxes of billionaires? Because this guy is funded by billionaires to cut the tax of billionaires. And look at what Donald Trump is doing in the States, cutting the tax of billionaires, and look at what that does to living standards. So, you know, I don't like getting involved in the immigration foreigner debate, but listen, I know who funds these guys, and I know what they're doing to billionaire taxes. And I know what those billionaires will do with that money. They'll buy your mum's house. So yeah, be careful with these, like, dangerous. Do you think AI will help or hinder social inequality? Yeah, I think it'll make it much, much worse. I think it'll make it much, much worse.
Why is that?
Because the people who own the machines are going to use the machines to replace people, and then you know, then you won't have a job. You know, loads of people are probably going to lose their jobs. It's just going to drive wages down. But it's super interesting, right? Because you have this with a lot of technologies. It does improve productivity, economic productivity, but it does it in such a way that it only benefits the owners of the machines and it hurts the workers. But you know, if we each had I'm going to get called a communist again. If we had ownership of these resources, ordinary people, then we could use them to our benefit. But the truth is, the people who own these things are going to use these things to drive your wages down, to take your job, and that's going to be worse. It's going to be bad for inequality. Honestly, I think there's a horrible laziness sometimes from these tech bros. They're like, oh, tech's going to make the world a better place, as if all of those generations of poverty, desperate poverty, and fighting for a better share didn't happen. You know, you don't fight for your share, you won't get your share. Go look at what life is like in Nigeria and Brazil and India for ordinary people. Yeah, that will happen here if we don't fight. Yeah, it's not just technology won't fix it. It's not Star Trek. Why do you dress like you do? Aren't you trying too hard to look normal? Yeah, this is growing. There's a kind of family of conspiracy theories, which is 1, my voice is not my real voice. 2, my clothes are not my real clothes. And 3, my kitchen is not my real kitchen. Sorry, am I mistaken, or do a lot of people not dress like this?
It's a good question. What does a millionaire look like?
These are very like practical clothes for the weather we are in at the moment. Like, I don't know what you want. I'm busy making YouTube videos. Yeah, you can't be my personal shopper and then I look like a do you feel like you're fighting a losing battle? I think it looks like I'm winning. What do you think? If you were Prime Minister right now, how would you solve the cost of living crisis? You know, this is another question, which whilst I really understand the sentiment, I get asked this a lot, by the way. If I was Prime Minister right now, right here, right now, and I tried to implement like taxation of wealth, you and I both know what would happen, which is like every single newspaper in the world would start attacking me like unbelievably massively, and then I would become like the most hated man in the country within about 6 weeks, and I would retire and go to the Philippines. You know, this is not a question of Gary Stevenson comes in like a hero and saves the world, becoming a Prime Minister. You need to have broad support for this, you know, and until we have the public understanding that the problem is not immigrants, but is inequality in billionaires, then we won't be able to change the tax system. So unfortunately, it has to be, I wish it was as simple as that. It has to be a multi-stage problem, which is first, you build up that working class understanding, you build up that working class support, And then you start to pressure the politicians. And we're a long way from that, but we've come a long way in the last couple of years, so I'll keep pushing at it. Why should my kids pay tax on the inheritance I worked hard to give them? Why? If you do not tax very wealthy people, then they will buy everything. The kids of ordinary families will own nothing. And you have this kind of mad situation where you have like ordinary people with small amounts of wealth, like trying so hard to protect their tiny amount of wealth that they're just allowing themselves to be like eaten by these billionaires. As these guys get richer and richer and richer and richer and richer, what happens is, what ordinary families see is two things. One, asset prices going up. And number two, young people can't buy assets. And that's why you see this massive like age-related division in ordinary families, which is older people think that what's happening is great because they see their house price going up. And they get told by the newspapers, don't worry, your kids will be fine when they stop buying avocado toast and This is my message to older people who own assets, if you're watching. Your kids will not be fine. Your kids will not be fine. I have made millions of pounds betting on the fact that your kids will not be fine unless you tax the rich. Single best piece of financial advice you have for somebody? Honestly, don't keep, I think that mindset of like constantly, this very consumerist mindset of like trying to constantly upgrade your lifestyle, I think that's like really unhealthy. But I mean, it's super common in our society. Like obviously, if you have things you really, really want, really, really need, you want to have like a comfortable home, that's good. But, there's a lot of things you can do that don't involve buying. Like when I have a bit of free time, I study languages, I go to the gym. I go to Pure Gym. I'm not a member of some fancy luxury gym. It works for me. Don't get involved in that spending rat race. Aren't you a hypocrite if you're still trading and making millions? No, I'm not. I wake up every day, I make videos for you on YouTube for no money to stop the economy from collapsing. Like, I'm never telling anybody don't make money. I'm never telling anybody give your money away. What I'm telling people to do is exactly what I do, which is try to stop the economy collapsing. That's what I do. Listen, I'm not here to be Jesus Christ and nail myself to the cross. I want to make money. I want to have a nice life, just like you do. And I also want to try and stop the economy from collapsing. It's not complicated. Won't wealthy people just leave the UK if we raise taxes? So this question, I think, and this is a common misunderstanding, this relies on, I think, a somewhat intentional confusion, which is confusing people who have a good job that make a lot of money for people who own enormous amounts of assets. So I'm not trying to tax working people. Obviously, if you tax working people, in a lot of cases, they can go and do that work from Dubai or Singapore or whatever, and they can pay lower taxes. Wealthy people, they own houses, they own property, they own natural resources, they own government debt, they own your mortgage. And if you think about it, these people are actually much easier to tax. I think the best example of this is Roman Abramovich. Suddenly, the UK government is like, we can't tax billionaires, it's impossible. And then they want to tax Roman Abramovich, and it's like, turns out, what rich people own is massive like a football stadium, and you can tax them. And Roman Abramovich is not getting that money now. It's being frozen. Like, this is not about taxing working people who can move. This is about taxing fixed assets which can't move. I want to be clear when I say that. I'm aware that this will be difficult to implement. That's why I say we need to build the popular support, because without the popular support, it will be difficult to get the implementation right. But we did it. If you look at the 20th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, extremely high inequality in places like here, the UK, also in places like the US. We changed our tax systems. We redistributed. We ended up in a situation where ordinary families could own their homes, could own stocks and shares, and ordinary people could live decent lives and go on holiday. So we have done it before. It's not impossible, but it is difficult, obviously. Opinions on Jeff Bezos. Do you order from Amazon? I'm getting asked a lot of individual. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we can arrange like a dinner, me, Jeff Bezos and Keir Starmer, and then I can get back to you on these questions. I do order from Amazon, Listen, I'm a f***ing busy guy, man. I order from wherever I can. And nothing against people that boycott Amazon or whatever, but personally, I would just like to say, listen, if you're doing that, that's good for you. I don't like this shifting of like big political problems into like random consumerist bullshit problems. Like, yeah, sure, you can all stop using plastic bags and you can stop flying and you can order off Amazon. If you don't tax Jeff Bezos, he's gonna eat your kids. Okay, simple as that. Who do you vote for? I vote for and I support publicly whoever I think will help me stop this collapse in inequality. Last year in the election, the Green Party adopted our wealth taxes in their manifesto. So obviously I voted for the Greens and I supported the Greens. I'm going to go into the election, which will probably be in 4 years' time. This is the way it works, right? I want to be able to go into that election with a massive, massive YouTube following, and I want Labour to have to call me and have to have a meeting. And I want to say to them, are you going to give me anything on wealth taxes? Are you going to give me anything on inequality? And if they give me something good, then I'll support them. And if they don't, then I won't. You know, if you're out there, Keir, if you want to stop poverty, listen, I could go and get paid £2 million a year by any bank in the city. I'm offering to help you for free, so, you know, let's have a coffee. Is there any hope for the working class? Yeah, of course. You know the story of Pandora's box is this box with all the evils of the world. Pandora opened it because these stories are always very sexist. And all the evils of the world came out and the world was all the evils here. And then when they looked in the box, the last thing in the box still there was hope, you know. If we allow to be shit, then it will be shit. If you work, you can make things better. And I'm not trying to make things perfect. I'm not a communist. I'm not hoping to make like perfect inequality. But look how bad was 100, 200 years ago, even in a country like this, the UK. And look at the improvements were made up until the late 20th century, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Like, has come from a lot worse place than we are now to a decent life. It wasn't perfect, but people like my parents could have financial security. So we did it before. We can do it again. So there's always hope.
The idea is that by going into space, building infrastructure, ultimately accessing resources in space, you save the Earth because the Earth is the best place in the universe because we evolved on it and it's unique